Some stories are meant to entertain, others are meant to heal. And today's guest is proving that they can do both. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unscripted with Alison Maloney. Today's guest is Lisa Regina. She's an actress, a filmmaker, a survivor, and the creator of Heroic Episodes, a powerful dramatic series inspired by the real stories of U.S. veterans. After surviving a brutal domestic violent attack, she changed the course of her life. Lisa turned her pain into purpose, founding A Right to Heal and dedicating herself to helping survivors and veterans reclaim their voices through storytelling. For more than a decade, Lisa has interviewed veterans across every branch of service, documenting their trauma, resilience, and courage. Those conversations became the foundation for Heroic Episodes, a series that not only honors the experiences on screen, but actively hires and trains veterans behind the scenes, creating real pathways to healing and opportunity. Today, we're diving into Lisa's journey and the heart behind Heroic Episodes. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. I'm
Thank
honored
you.
to speak with you on behalf of my dad, who's a Marine, my uncle, who is in the Army, a lot of my friends who are retired Marines. Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Very grateful for your family service and just really excited to share with you. Thanks.
Of course. Before we get into Heroic Episodes, I want to talk about your story because it's a very powerful story. And I don't think everybody knows what happened to you back in 2005. Talk to us about what happened just a little bit before your wedding.
Sure. Yeah, April 2nd, 2005, that was the date of my assault. My then fiance, we were getting married in June 10th. So we were going to see my family, leaving New York City to South Jersey for an engagement party to celebrate. It was a happy time. And he had always had this, anger that could go from 0 to 1,000 within moments. Typically, I could diffuse him and kinda calm him down, and I think in a way I got used to playing that role of that
Mhm.
person who could calm him and talk to him, but this day was different. He escalated from emotional, verbal abuse to physical abuse and literally grabbed the back of my head while he was driving and started slamming my head into the dash of his vehicle, and then swerving all over Houston Street. You can imagine, Houston's a
Wow.
pretty busy
Yeah.
about 1:30 in the afternoon. There's people all over, and, of course, when he swerved to the side of the road, people just kinda ran out of the way. I guess they thought they were going to get run over, which has happened in the city, we know. And then ultimately, he threw me out of the vehicle after striking me, and it was really horrible. I was knocked unconscious, fractured pelvis, contusions, concussion, and, Allison, the thing that hurts me, and it's still really like, I can talk about it years later through healing and empowering myself and helping others, but there's this part of me that just, when I say it, my heart just breaks. People were walking over my body, and that part of humanity, that insensitivity, that disregard for someone laying on the ground that they just saw thrown from a vehicle, that I don't think I'll ever get over. So I have this love-hate relationship with New York City, one woman stopped to help me and call the ambulance, and she was from California, and years later I was able to find her through some detective work and thank her. So that was really amazing to be able to just thank her for having that much care to stop. And the significance of that moment is just something out of a movie. I was coming out of being knocked out, and I could see a taxi cab, yellow cab with the door open, and I could see a man's feet, and I could hear him screaming at her saying, "Get the F in the cab." And she said, "I can't leave her. I can't." He said, "Get the F in the cab. You don't know her. You don't owe her anything."
Oh,
And that was her partner, which I learned years later. But he slammed the door, took off her partner, and she stayed with me until the ambulance came.
well,
So,
I hope she's not with that partner anymore for sure.
really.
What happened after that? You went to the hospital and then what happened?
Went to the hospital in New York City. That was really horrific. Just a lot of, things that I forgot about or blacked out because of the trauma so many years. But I do remember the detective because his words really struck me when he was looking at my arm. My bruises were so definite. He said, I could dust fingerprints off these bruises. And he said, look, I know you're afraid, but if you don't press charges, we will, because this happened in our city on my streets and we will, So he really guided me. And even following my assault when I was released from the hospital, I was still in a state of, post traumatic stress. My pupils were the size of saucers. I was barricaded in my apartment because of who my fiance was. I had a lot of press paparazzi kind of hanging outside my building and leaving really baiting painful messages. They were making up stories that there were sex tapes, which never existed, things to try to bait me to get me to pick up the phone. And of course, I wouldn't talk to anyone.
Mhm.
And it was my sister. And that's emotional for me because she passed away right before I got married. I've been married September 10th, 2020, and my sister passed away and didn't make the wedding. So that's still a sore spot. But she was the one that called and she heard my voice and she knew that I needed help. And she sent friends up to the city to get me out of there and bring me back home so I could be with family and start to heal.
I can imagine.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry about your sister first. I can imagine the healing process was not it was a lengthy one. And how did you I'm sure you're
Years.
still healing. I don't think you ever can completely heal from something like that.
Yes.
Talk to me about the process and kind of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. My sister Elaine was, the rock of the family. My mom died when I was young. My mom was 51 when she passed. So my sister took on that maternal role and she was more than a sister. She was like a mom. So yeah, following that, when I was finally able to sneak out of that New York City apartment and get to some domestic violence counseling, facilitated groups through Safe Horizon, which was wonderful. Really, the thing that first helped me was having a legal pad next to my bed, little writing, because I always would write. Performance arts was always part of my life, acting, writing, filmmaking. So it made sense that I was grabbing that pen and just kind of pouring out my pain. And I still have that tablet with all the writing that I was writing, and the words that I was writing in repetition were, of course, why, pain, abuse, just repetition. And someone in my tenement building that I lived in said something like, "Oh, it's just an Italian thing." And that just really stayed with me because, my brother's Italian. He doesn't abuse his wife. He's an
Oh.
amazing father. I know a lot of Italian men that are great, partners and fathers. So that really hit me. And I started writing, it's just an Italian thing with a big question mark. And that writing I shaped into a monologue, like a spoken word piece. And it really empowered me to be able to start pouring out my pain, purging it, and then shaping it into a monologue. And I shared that writing with this domestic violence facilitated group. And the women were inspired to write, and they asked me to kind of guide them. So I would invite them back to my little fifth floor walk up apartment, and we would write in a circle. And I would put all their writings in a locked file cabinet because I didn't want them to bring it home if they were
Mhm.
still in that situation. And ultimately, that was the birth of a Right to Heal, my C3 nonprofit, just giving writing as a tool, an alternate way for women to express their pain. And then we started staging the monologues. I would adapt their true stories with their permission, of course, changed the name and locations so that, you couldn't identify it.
Mhm.
But the women came to the performances in New York City, and I invited advocates because I became a keynote speaker for the YWCA, started going out sharing my story. So I invited those advocates to sit with the women whose stories were coming to life on stage. And it was such a healing, cathartic process to have that safe distance as an audience member and see that. And it really helped a lot of the women to realize I need to change that.
Writing is healing. I always find I
Is
call it my therapy when I write. It just helps whether it's just my journal or writing a blog. There's something about it. Maybe it's the release, maybe it's just something. And I love that you created that for those women. What are some of the things that they said to you after going through that process?
Well, the one that stands out the most, she still lives in the Village in New York City, and every year on my birthday and Christmas, I get a card from her, and she says, "You saved my life." life. And I
Oh,
always remind her that she was ready to change and I was just there to support her and facilitate that change. And the significance of that story, we learned that her husband, who she ultimately got a restraining order, divorced, was part of a terrorist cell. Yes, and worked in a school system in one of the New York boroughs. So imagine what would have happened if, you know what I mean?
yeah.
It's just so we're still friends to decades later. And, that's the kind of relationship and bond that I've been able to build through my pain and, my assault, all the beautiful things that came out of it. That's what I embrace and appreciate. And of course, great gratitude and deep gratitude to be alive so I can do this work now. And of course, I've expanded my work to include firefighters, veterans, their spouses, their families, because in 2012, I met retired Army Captain Leslie Nicole Smith, and
Mhm.
that's how my advocacy work broadened. When I learned that trauma is trauma, and a civilian like myself was able to connect with a veteran and really kind of discuss our pain and how we heal together.
Yeah, you're right. Trauma is trauma, and especially for, first responders and veterans. And I love to see things like this happening because I think years ago, and I still think there's, I have family who are retired from law enforcement. They don't talk about it. They're finally starting to talk. They're finally starting to go to therapy, but not everyone does. And it's finally becoming acceptable to say, yeah, I have PTSD, or yeah, that really affected me. Talk to me about heroic episodes, how this came to be, because you've spent years collecting, interviewing, talking to veterans.
Yes. When I met Captain Smith, she really had an impact on my life. I was teaching an acting workshop at our dear friend Barry Morgenstein's studio in New York City. And he said, I have a friend. She's an Army veteran. She wants to take your workshop. And when she called me, I was really blown away because she lost her sight and her leg while serving in Bosnia. And she said, Lisa, it's been on my bucket list to take an acting class. I have my credit card ready. How much is it? And that just, I said to her, I said, Leslie, you pay nothing. You paid the greatest sacrifice and price you never pay. Like, I'd be honored to have you in my class. And she came into the workshop. There were about 30 New York City actors, and she just blew us away because her level of comfortability on camera
Mm.
and her bright smile, her positive outlook on life just inspired everyone. So that day is when I started to realize, because her and I talked about my assault, what she had been through. And I said to her, I have a role for you in a short film that I wrote, low budget short film, write, direct, you do everything. And I said, the role is a VA counselor, and you have that ease about you where you're so easy to talk to and you're so positive. I would love for you to play that role. Long story short, she came back up to Queens the day we were filming, all the way up from Fredericksburg, Virginia, with her service dog Isaac. Imagine, legally blind, to Penn
Yeah.
Station, out to Queens. And she filmed with us for 14 hours. And it was funny because I was doting over her and she grabbed my hand at one point. She said, Lisa, I served in the military. You don't have to pamper me. And it was just a joy to have her on set. And then after 14 hours, of course, I had a room for her, wanted her to stay, give her a nice dinner and talk to her. And she was so filled with emotion, Allison. She was holding my hand and she said, I haven't felt this camaraderie since I served. And she said, I'm going home because I can't sleep. I'm so excited. And
Oh.
she went all the way home, got home like 4 a.m. And I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about the impact it had on her and the healing it was for,
Mhm.
to be on set. And it made sense. It started to click like, wow, the camaraderie of a film team, of a mission in the military. And that's when the next two short films that I, produced, directed, all, small films, I invited veterans on set as cast, crew, consultants. And it was the same experience for all. It was amazing. That's what really inspired heroic episodes, because I started learning about their stories. And, there are a lot of humanitarian stories. And inspirational stories. They're not all pain, they're not all doom and gloom stories, but, of course, some of them are. But I started interviewing veterans, adapting their stories to a dramatic narrative series, heroic episodes. And through a colleague who came on as a producer, he introduced me to Joe Mantegna, who's now our executive producer. So it's an amazing project that we're developing. I've partnered with nonprofits, VFWs, veteran organizations, and businesses so we can employ veterans in every episode. We can offer at-risk teens because we will be filming in Kensington, Philadelphia, which is a really underserved community. So I partnered with nonprofits there, as well as professors at Temple University who are experts in young men of color that are trying to get out of that environment that's so violent. And so, and some are trying to heal from trauma. So it's more than a TV series. It's like an outreach to community because we want it to be a project that is really, the premise is healing for everyone. And it's a big vision, but I feel confident that because so many people are attracted to it, are inspired by it, and that want to be part of it, there's no doubt in my mind that we can do it together.
How can you not be inspired by that? I mean, it's just, and then you had mentioned, you talk about employing veterans, and they are the hardest workers. They're not going to complain about a 14-hour day at all. I mean, this is a walk in the park for them.
Exactly.
What have some of the veterans and even some of the folks from the community said to you about this?
Well, on one of my film sets, I had about 42 Legion riders on motorcycles, all veterans, men and women. It was a great scene because they pull into this farm and they surround like a silent shield. They get off their motorcycles and stand there. And in front of them are 8 women who were actual survivors of violence, actual violence, assaults. And I had black tape over the women's mouths because as they stepped forward for the first time in their lives, these are real survivors, they would remove the tape and say the date of their assault. And those veterans protected them and stood there. And it was an amazing experience. It really was. And after, of course, the veterans would come up to me, and I had a very eclectic group. I had combat veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq, and I had Vietnam veterans. And this one Vietnam vet I'll never forget, and I still keep in touch with him. He had tears in his eyes, big brawly guy. And he said, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Of course, my God." He said, "Thank you. We felt forgotten." Vietnam veteran, right? He said, "I miss this, man. I miss being with my brothers and sisters." He said, "Your set has created that camaraderie." And it's just been happening. Every experience has been the same, and every veteran has responded the same way. So I know that this is the right thing to do. I know it's bigger, way bigger than me. It's not about me.
I can imagine that they've all, become friends too, just from being on set. I'm sure that they have lasting friendships. The Vietnam vet with maybe, somebody who's, 20, 30 years younger than them. That's amazing. How many episodes in are you as far as filming?
Well, we haven't began filming because
Okay.
we're still in that development phase. We need to raise the money. So we're holding a private Zoom event with Joe Mantegna, my producer, Ronnie Marmo, and the professors from Temple University, some of the experts, Kobe Williams, who wrote a book, Interrupting Violence. So I've really created an ecosystem, if you will, of experts and people that really care about our veterans and care about healing and our at-risk teens, our communities. And that private event, the purpose of it is to invite philanthropists and people that really care about the mission and the vision of heroic episodes so they will invest in it, because our objective, Allison, is to produce it independently so we can keep our promise to employ veterans and have that outreach to community.
I love that. What has the response been as far as people getting involved? You said you had that private event, and what's next?
We'll hold the private event on March 31st.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Soon.
That's
So coming up. Okay.
yeah. So what's next is raise the budget go into pre-production. I've already scouted my locations. I already have my locations. And what's amazing about a message and a mission like this one about healing is that the nonprofits that I partner with have been able to provide me with locations as a donation.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
yeah, so it's really about everyone coming together and bringing what they can to the table in order for this production to happen.
I love it. Is there anything that any people listening or watching can do if they wanted to get involved, if they wanted to do something to help get this moving forward?
Absolutely. My website is heroicepisodes.org. If you'd like to donate there, or if you'd like to send me an email to get some more information about it, maybe you're a veteran that would like to be on set with us. I also have a veterans drone training program that because I knew that developing a series would be a big vision, take some time. So in the meantime, through my nonprofit, Right to Heal, I thought, what can I create to help veterans right now and give them the hard skills they need maybe to transition into a new career? I'm a Part 107 drone pilot, so
Whoop,
I
that's
implemented
great.
yeah, I love it, and one of my Marines inspired me to go for the Part 107 exam, which was really intimidating, but I did it, and so I created this veterans drone training program, and we've already put through 12 veterans successfully with their Part 107 license. We have 3 more that just registered, and we just received a grant for $15,000 from the Patriot Fund. Thank you, Patriot Fund, amazing. And that allows us to open registration again. So we're accepting applications for the veterans drone training. And what's really wonderful about that is once we start filming heroic episodes, those veteran pilots can come onto our set and we'll give them some hands-on experience, some, pay working for us. But so it'll really come together and work simultaneously once we start filming. That's the goal, to
Mhm.
start filming because heroic episodes is the umbrella over everything.
This is incredible. You mentioned it all comes together. So you have the healing part, you have the camaraderie part, you have the veterans getting together, you are employing, you're helping people in the community. I mean, you're doing so much. It really is full circle.
It is, and I'm pretty relentless, of course, a project of this magnitude, you have your days where you feel like, "Oh, can I do this?" But it's just when I'm feeling that way, there's always someone that comes through and that says, "Hey, how can I help?" So I think it's just contagious, it's a positive thing and it's just becoming bigger and bigger. And I know it's a matter of time. And you having me on here really helps me to communicate to others why I'm doing this, where my passion comes from my survival, and just knowing that this is my purpose, this is what I'm meant to do. And I might not be able to, change things in our systems. I know the VA, veterans getting their benefits. I hear all the time the struggles and, how tough it is. And I can't fix that, but I can do this.
Yeah, that is your purpose. Did you ever think on April 2nd, 2005, that you would be here doing this?
No way. Never thought that. No. I was really focused on me. Everything was about me and my acting career and my writing career and and, out of my assault, I've become a better person. I've become stronger. I've become more giving and caring of others. And, yeah.
It's
So
God's plan. It was God's plan.
was God's plan, and here I am, yeah, and just, how things are meant to be, that expression, "Nothing is a coincidence, God's plan." Joe Mantegna, when I met him, and he learned that I was friends with Captain Smith, he's like, "We love Leslie." Oh, they're both friends with Gary Sinise, they're both Gary Sinise ambassadors, so I just look at the connections between my friend Ronnie Marmo, Joe, Leslie, and I'm just, "Okay, I'm following your lead,
Yeah, it is a small world when you think about it,
Yeah.
but yeah, things, we always hear things happen for a reason, and you were put on this earth to help so many people, and I'm so thankful you decided to come on the podcast, and
Yeah.
I know everyone who's listening and watching is gonna go to your website, they're going to donate, they're gonna get involved, they're gonna share, they're gonna do everything their part to help you and the veterans, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Of course.